Hey, one light, no fireplace. That makes it more creepy, right? I was up to 4 a.m. last night helping a buddy on some problems. And that's what buddies are for, yeah? It's recently written a long email by somebody, and the so-called scientific people are not scientists at all, and they're incredibly myopic. And one of their telltale earmarks that they're so incredibly blind to is that your so-called evidence must be wide enough and broad enough to pass through a giant tunnel that a jet could fly through. But when it comes to any evidence for things that they make claims of, it's to be taken easily without any substantiation. So they always move the mark on what they want evidence for. And you can always tell what they understand by the things that they say. They use specific words which are telltale earmarks. And this video is a whole lot less about ghosts than it is about logical methodology and seeing through the lies and nonsense of other people. Why am I opening this? I'm going to edit out that later because I don't need this. I only have like 4 sentences to actually address this video. I have it here on my little phone. Yeah. This is about ghosts. I know it was written this long letter. I'm not interested in going into the details. I've had that before. I've actually, I think it was like 12, 13 years ago, I wrote a now famous article. And it's short and pithy. It's about 5 pages long, depending on how it's formatted. Roughly 10 pages long, actually, in normal pitch font on ghosts. One of the guys that's actually on Ghost Adventures. Actually, I think all of them have read it, but I made him even an alligator wallet, and he's familiar with the article. And it's incredibly pithy. You can get to the heart of the matter really sensibly. Because most people think, when it comes to metaphysics, that it requires a leap of faith, or you're supposed to have a belief in it, because, it's not incredibly logical. But contrary to the New Age section of the bookstore, which is full of a bunch of, just garbage, you're supposed to take on faith. There's that little word, faith. There's 2 different types of faith in ancient metaphysics, by the way. There's faith in something that you can never confirm or have evidence for. And by evidence, I mean evidence broadly. And there's faith in something that you know, like your love for your wife, or your love for your child, or you have faith that the sun's going to rise tomorrow because your entire life the sun has risen in the morning, and you have faith that it'll rise. So this Palivarasrada has 2 different types, and that's actually true through all metaphysics. There's oblique faith in things you'll never have confirmation for, and there's faith in things that you have absolute conviction in, kind of like the love for your little child, or your wife, or your husband. And getting to these people in discussion about ghosts, and I'd like to actually go over some finer points on ghosts, because it's hyperlogical. Genuine metaphysics is not like the New Age section of a bookstore, which is full of a bunch of hokum nonsense, poppycock twaddle, just foolishness, just a bunch of wackadoodle. I need some sort of like magic crystal here that I can stick in my chakra center and align my chakra. You know what I'm talking about. Is that you say, let's hold up here a second, Mr. so-called scientist, who's actually not a scientist. Do you have any kids? Well, yes, I do. I don't know what that has to do with a discussion about kids. Well, do you love your little son or daughter? Well, of course I do. I was like, well, prove it. Unless you can provide me some form of hard evidence, that you love them, then I don't believe you have any love for your wife. Or, well, that's ridiculous. I take care of them and I feed them, and that just means you're taking care of somebody. That's no different than what a jailer does. A jailer looks after the prisoners and feeds them and walks them every day in the little courtyard, right? But the jailer has no love for the prisoners that he or she takes care of. So unless you can give me some evidence that you love your wife or kids, you're just talking a whole bunch of nonsense. I don't believe you. Well, that's something. It's like, no, it's the exact same thing. These people want evidence, and they love to talk about evidence, and they'll use the word exist. And when people say, oh, I don't believe in ghosts. And I say, well, I don't really care what you believe in. What about what is irreducibly and logically true? Yeah? and I use my radio analogy, which is kind of nearly perfect, and I'll get to that in a second, but they use words like exist and real and belief. So I don't believe in ghosts. Well, I'm not interested in what I believe or you believe. I'm interested in what is logically deducible about a disembodied being, because that's all a ghost is. A ghost is just a fancy word for disembodied being. If you say disembodied being, people will be more open to it, but that word carries so much weight. There's countless thousands of words in any language that have a lot of nasty or, squirrely connotation. Yeah, and when you say that word, the connotation pops in your head rather than the reality of what it is. And that's a huge problem. I'm not interested in anybody's belief. What do you believe in? Well, I don't believe in ghosts. Well, who cares what you believe in? I'm talking about what is true. People say, well, do ghosts exist? It's like, well, let's look at that word exists, and not to be a skeptic or to someone that's interested in sophistry, getting to like debating what the definition of is. But existence means existence. It means something phenomenal and palpable. What a ghost is, of course, is not phenomena, rather noumena. So we can't talk about belief in ghosts. We can't ask the question about whether ghosts exist. And of course the word ghost itself is extremely loaded, and then we get to the word real. What do you mean by real? Real, by connotation and denotation, means something phenomenal. Even gaseous phenomena such as hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, so on and so forth. I mean, it is real in the absolute sense that it is empirically palpable. So ghosts are not real because they're not phenomena. Do they exist? Well, the word exist, i.e. existence, refers to phenomena, something that is literally physical with a Cartesian component that is demonstrable. Demonstrable, something has mass and magnitude and measure, like this rock in my hand. So ghosts they don't exist. They're not real. What people believe in is not important. And I will concede to all of that, but that is not a concession to, for example, ghosts. We have to reject, of course, once again, the word ghost. That's another problem, like exist and belief and whether a ghost is real, because the word is so heavily connotated that everybody immediately thinks of goofy little images of ghosts on TV shows and, horror movies and all the other rest and nonsense. They want hard evidence of things. By the way, I'll point out to you the ignorances of these people, wherein which they're entirely actually, self-inconsistent. They have never defined the word field, and they have never ever defined the word energy. That's not my opinion, or belief, or feeling. That's a fact. So these people that want to blithely talk about... I like that long letter that I got. Ghosts don't exist. I saw your video about ghosts before, and I read your article, and they just don't exist. I said, well, you're right. I'll agree with you that they don't exist, because the very word exist is contrary to the definition and denotation of what a disembodied being, aka a ghost, actually is. So are ghosts real? I will tell you no. Do ghosts exist? No, because I actually know what the word real and exist actually mean. And they are not applicable to noumena. Yes, they're not. We'll say, well, you could use your radio analogy because referring to radio signals, we can use an EMF meter and a tri-field meter, all of which, by the way, are used in ghost hunting, by the way, and a frequency counter. I used to have a frequency counter, and determine that the signal is real. Well, a signal is not real. It is a field phenomena, specifically EMR, say electromagnetic radiation. But we wind the clock back 100 years, and I'll talk about something really, really important. It's a prediction I heard as a young kid when I was, it was in the early 80s. Because radio has been around forever, natural radio phenomena, but nobody had the ability to detect it. They say, well, that's just ridiculous. When radio was first, Marconi didn't invent radio. Nikola Tesla did. We can argue about that. It's completely irrelevant. Started talking about wireless communication. For a while there, people said, this is completely ridiculous. Just nothing out there, and, you could transmit a recording or someone's voice across the world. via this invisible stuff, that's nowhere. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Humans are highly unevolved creatures. And, right when radio came out and radio became popular, people, of course, did, stick to the fact that, well, yeah, I guess this phenomenon is real. But back about in the 1980s, there was a group of scientists talking about, well, humanity gets more evolved technologically and so forth in a couple decades, because that was in the 80s, I remember hearing this group of scientists. It's craziness like Loch Ness Monster and ghosts, and they lump all craziness together. Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot, I mean, all of that, of course, is ridiculous, of which there's absolutely no evidence. And those are references, even though they're unreal, to phenomenal, palpable, demonstrable phenomena, which, if they were real, which they aren't, they would exist, and they would be real. They would be phenomenal things. But they'll lump ghosts in there, and of course the word ghost is so incredibly loaded. And so in the future, not too distant future, everybody's going to completely forget about ghosts. We'll be a lot more enlightened species. And you know what has happened since the 1980s? The exact opposite happened. And the reason why the exact opposite happened is because of blossoming of trans-spectral recording technology. Near-infrared, ultraviolet, trans-spectral, radio scanner, frequency scanners, recording devices, near-infrared, far-infrared recording devices. It just completely has gone off the Richter scale. So compared to the 80s, when these really enlightened scientists said, I forget where this was on, I think it was like on Nova, which was a scientific TV journal, the great minds talking on Nova. The exact opposite happened from what these fools predicted. Yeah. Is a radio signal real? I emphasize the genuine definition of real.
May be needed Wednesday. More information, along with other weather, hydrological...
I ask you that question. Is a signal real? Does a signal exist? You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, you can't touch it, you can't give any demonstrable... You can whip out a frequency counter, which will have a signal-to-noise ratio and peg on a frequency counter, but an EMF or tri-field meter is actually used for ghosts also, along with countless other media and transspectral recording phenomena. I will tell you flat out, and it's not my opinion, it's a fact, that all of the technology that's actually used by so-called ghost hunters, and I'm not one of them, will give you as much evidence of disembodied beings, which is what they should be called, as a frequency counter, an EMF meter, standing near an AM broadcast station or FM broadcast station where the frequency counter will peg and it will tell you the frequency that it's registering. There is as much and equal amount of evidence for a disembodied being as there is for any radio signal, AM, FM, UHF, VHF, HF, ELF, any of that stuff. There's no signal in the radio. People say, well, there's no soul in the body, because a ghost would be a soul, if we take your definition. Yes, that's exactly what a ghost would be. It would be the signal in the radio. But we know there is no signal in the radio. Anybody who goes looking for a soul in the body is a fool. That, however, is not a denial of a soul. It is a statement of the fact that the soul is consubstantial with the body, which, of course, is life. Life is a consubstantiality. Consubstantiality is a fancy word, basically, of saying the union thereof. Two things make... Chocolate milk requires cocoa and milk. So chocolate milk, put those two things together, you get chocolate milk, right? So... signal in the radio, you end up with a broadcast. Because the broadcast is actually not the signal. The broadcast is the interpolation of the signal, which is where again? I don't believe in signals. Like if you took a radio, of course there wouldn't be any broadcast back then, but you could tune in static from various natural phenomena. Took a radio back about 100 years. And so, in the future, people are going to be... TVs would be too complicated for people to understand. Radio would be a lot simpler to explain. So people would be listening to other people across the world. There would be this signal in the ether. You couldn't smell it, you couldn't taste it, you couldn't touch it. There's no evidence for it. Yeah? Unless you whip out a tri-field meter or a frequency counter. But those are the exact same devices, by the way, that are used to signal disembodied beings. Things will move, things will happen, there'll be electrostatic in the air, the temperature will drop, all these different phenomena. And they will peg EVF, near-infrared, so on and so on and so forth. By the way, the ancient Pali word for ghost is monomayakaya, which means mind-made artifice. Monomayakaya, or mentation, or mind-made artifice, is no different than that fancy body you got when you're dead asleep, when you're bebopping down the street or the fields. You're like walking on Mars, and you can smell things and taste things and touch things, and they're completely phantasms. Yeah, but when you're experiencing them, they're completely real. There's no evidence for any of that either. Sure there is. You can hook up someone's head to a I forget the device, and record the fact that they're in REM sleep. You can detect their alpha wave brain pattern, they're RNM. That's not proof of somebody dreaming about, rowing down the River Nile, with their favorite kitty cat and staring at the sun and, smelling the reeds and the salty air or whatever. There's no evidence for that. Say, hey, Mr. Ghost Denier, and I don't care what anybody believes. I don't believe in ghosts. Well, who cares? Prove to me that you love your wife or your son or your mother. Well, I do. Where's your evidence for it? I want to see some hard evidence of that. Well, blah, 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 blah. These are just disembodied beings. It's not fantastical. It's not fantasy. It's not a belief or a religion. These things are, in the truest sense of the word, I hate to use the word real. Real in the sense that, yes, it exists, but existence is also the wrong word. So you can't say real about ghosts. You can't say exist. Well, you don't believe in ghosts either. You just say they're not real and they don't exist. It's like, yeah, that's because these things are field energy noumena. They are not phenomena. They're palpable, like this rock. I can weigh it and measure it and smell it, or cut it up, and countless other things. Physics is about physics. Well, physics has never proved ghosts. Well, a ghost or a disembodied being would be metaphysical, not physical. Even Aristotle, the foundation of all modern scientific methodology is Aristotle. I'm not a big fan of Aristotle. And even Aristotle talked about disembodied beings at significant length. Because he wasn't a fool. I'm no fan of Aristotle, but even Aristotle was not a fool. But these people call themselves scientists are fools. They don't have a mind for acute nuance of meaning. Everything to them is palpable, empirical, demonstrable. If it isn't, then it doesn't exist. If I can't measure it, smell it, cut it, weigh it, taste it, then it does not exist. It's just like some sort of crazy belief system. This video is meant to be about so-called scientific methodology. They want you to present a mountain of evidence for something that is true, because disembodied beings are true. I'll use the word true regarding disembodied beings instead of exist or real. But they themselves can give you no evidence for what they hold so dear, which is also true. Yeah, they love their wife, they love their kid. But prove it! Give me some empirical evidence that you love your wife or kid. And saying that you feed them and pay their medical bills and buy them clothes is not proof. Even the state does that for, like homeless kids before they're adopted. They feed them and clothe them and generally take care of them. Yeah? They don't love them. So you didn't give me any proof that you love your wife or kids or your mother. You gave me no proof at all. So you don't love them. Yes, I do. How dare you say I don't love my wife and kids? It's like you've given me no evidence. And without any evidence, this is evidence that your love for them doesn't exist. These people are fools. Further on that matter, I'll make a statement of fact that's also undeniable. 95% of invention and discovery and the things that have built this world since the ancient days have been driven by the energy of things for which there is no evidence. Love, faith, hope, desire, dreams. None of these things are real, according to physics. I'll point to the fact that physics is about things that are physical and phenomenal and demonstrable. The entire world has been built on, destroyed upon, wrecked upon, for good or for worse, for good or for bad, upon all these things that, by definition, are no different than so-called ghosts. Demonstrably, there's no difference between a ghost or a disembodied being and love and hope and faith and fear and love and the desires and all the human's emotions that have built the pyramids, that have done everything, moved heaven and earth, built palaces, been the cause for conflict and strife and beauty and art and everything that's good and or bad in this world is due to these things that have no basis of evidence, no more so than a ghost. Disembodied beings are true. They're logical. I can't call them real, and I can't say they exist because I know the definition of real and exist. But they are true. They are hyperlogical, and they're no different than a signal, because there ain't no signal in this radio. Yeah, there ain't no soul in the body, and I see there's true. There's no soul in the body, but that would not mean, unless I was a fool, that I was denying the soul. Because there ain't no signal in the radio either. No little people inside the TV set. This is what we call small minds. People that cannot think, they don't know how to think, and quintessentially, they are the definition of a fool. Thank you so much. Lux Veritas. That book I was recommending the other day, by the way, was The Metaphysian by John Scotus Regina. Metaphysian. Periphyseon. Metaphysian. If you like these videos, any donations always warmly welcome, or you can tell me how much you hate this video. I kind of like the hate emails. I hate you, I don't like that video. Oh, goodness.